Hello and welcome to Compounding Curiosity. I'm your host Kyla Scanlon, and this podcast is all about compounding your curiosity alongside my own through thoughtful interviews with interesting guests. For transcripts and detailed show notes, check out the links in the description. Hopefully you're as keen as me to learn something new, so let's get stuck in. Alrighty, my guest today is Kyla Scanlon. Kyla is a prominent TikTok and YouTube financial analyst and also a good mate. I've known Kyla for a few years now, so today's chat is a good exploration of creator life and her growth over time. So in today's conversation, we cover creator life from starting out to now, dealing with brands and sponsorships, and staying mentally healthy with a life online. So I had a blast today and I hope you do too, so please enjoy my conversation with Kyla Scanlon. Kyla, thank you so much for coming on today, and this one's an interesting one for me because I've sort of seen you go from being someone who was creating just for fun with a full-time job to now being, a full-time creator, so you've got my dream goal pathway. But digging through some old DMs here, you said, in late 2020, for context, the grass is always greener, but I think that the freedom of writing plus thinking your own thoughts is greater than any corporate job, but alas, it does not pay right away.
Oh, wow.
So now you're probably comfortably on the other side, I reckon. Yeah. Is the grass greener? And what pain points do you have now?
No, that's so amazing. Yeah, I don't remember how we even got introduced, but I just remember messaging you back and forth when I was still at, my buy-side job, my institutional finance job, and like dreaming about doing what I do now. And I haven't really stopped to reflect on how far I guess I've come, even just objectively speaking. So it is greener. It's definitely, it's a lot of fun. Yeah, it's an amazing opportunity. Mm-hmm.
Did you ever notice there was a point in time where things started to pick up and metaphorical wave started to pick up and you just wanted to ride that as long as possible? Like, when did you feel things started to change?
Yeah, so, I think for everybody, like the pandemic was a big wake up call in terms of my growth. I'll get to that in a second, but like why I sort of made the decision, I think is important to like how I grew it, if that makes sense. But, like the pandemic was sort of a big wake up call, and it was like, I've always been really passionate about financial education. I really want to do this. And so I sort of took the leap to go full time on this without much of a plan. It was just a passion. And I know you're not supposed to like mix work and passion or whatever, but I was like, I have to do this. I just have to see what happens. Even though I had no safety net, if things went wrong, then I was going to have to figure a lot of stuff out. And so everything luckily went really well and has been going really well. I made this video about Elon Musk back in May of 2021, and that was like my first really big viral video. Like it got almost 10,000 likes on Twitter. And then the TikTok started to do really well. And then the newsletter started. So everything just started to like kind of pick up steam, but it's been amazing. I don't know if there was like a point in time where it sort of everything picked up steam. It's just been, I think, consistent effort, but yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, and looking at your work, the coolest thing for me is you've sort of got so many different channels and avenues. So how do you view what to focus on? Is TikTok like the backbone of what you do and then everything follows on from that? Or how do you view different content and different mediums, I guess?
Yeah, so there's like a couple layers to it. So the TikTok, Instagram Reels, and YouTube Shorts all get cross-posted. It's the same video, but that's like a daily market update. So I try to explain like what's going on, why things are happening. Sometimes it'll be a broader explainer, like how we actually define a recession in the United States. So it's not 2 quarters of negative GDP growth, but it's all these other things. And then I have this weekly newsletter where I'll do like larger thought pieces like the vibe session piece, or I'll do more like weekly update styles depending on what I think people sort of need at the moment. Like I don't know if there's a lot of need for like big thought leadership from me specifically right now. Like I'm more useful as a weekly update sort of person right now, I believe. And so like that is my newsletter, and then the newsletter gets turned into YouTube, and the YouTube gets turned into a podcast. And I'm experimenting right now with doing interviews on my YouTube. So I interviewed Mary Daly from the Federal Reserve, have interviewed a couple of other people, and then also these shorter like explainer videos on YouTube. So I did one on Credit Suisse, did one on the fiscal plan from the United Kingdom. So it's kind of like all over the place, and it's a lot of content. But yeah, I'm just trying to see like what is most useful and like what people need. So yeah.
Yeah, no, all over the place is good because it keeps it fresh and you don't get too not bored, but you know what I mean? It changes things up.
Yeah. Yeah, and you kind of have to, like people get bored of the same old style. You also get bored of like making content in the same old way too. So, yeah.
Yeah. And how are you finding interviews? A bit different for you, or enjoying it?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to hear what you think about interviewing, but like, it's sort of interesting because you almost have to like focus on, okay, like this is what they're saying. This is how I can frame the next question based on what they're saying. So I feel like I don't absorb as much information from the interview as much as I do like framing. Do you find that to be similar for you?
Yeah, because you feel bad and there's a bit of pressure to
Yeah.
ask the next question. So
Right.
you obviously have to listen because you need to like, answer the next question or ask the next question. But there's also I'm freaking out just to keep going.
Yeah. It's like, okay, can I have any pauses or lulls? Just got to keep on talking. Yeah.
Yeah, especially for me, I'm still working on it.
It
gets
hard.
better some days, but I talk way too fast. I don't know. Do you have this as well?
I get criticized heavily for how fast I talk. Yeah, I'm the same way.
And I even mentioned at the start of this podcast, like, people aren't here to listen to me, so I take getting out the way very seriously, sometimes too much,
Yeah. Well, I think like that's one thing that's sort of tough about interview style podcasts is like people do want to hear from you, I think that your voice and like how you end up explaining things through the question itself or like explaining after that person talks. Cause like oftentimes with interview style series, these people who are being interviewed are brilliant. Like, I'm not saying like it applies here in this exact situation, but like they're normally like, PhD economists, like policymakers. So the interviewer like is not only, in my opinion, is not only asking questions, but also serving as like a buffer for the audience to truly understand like what this person is saying, in my opinion.
Totally agree. And same thing. I think people do so many, like you've done a fair few podcasts now with Jim O'Shaughnessy on the Valley Hive. Yeah. And then people might prefer your interview with Jim or your interview with Brandon. Like it's something for everyone. So still coming to terms with. But if I'm allowed to ask this,
sure.
How much of your work do you, or even can you outsource? Because I think calling it prolific is an understatement. But you mentioned on the Valley Hive podcast that you could outsource, but it's your baby. Has that changed? And
Yeah, I think I went on that about a year ago now. So it has not changed. No? Yeah, I tried to hire somebody and it really went poorly. Just like a lack of communication, which was really difficult because it was like the first time I ever hired somebody and I was really excited. They were going to help me scale out some things that just take up a lot of time, like reading contracts or doing like administrative work. And I was really excited to not do that anymore, but unfortunately it didn't work out. But yeah, so it's still me doing everything. And I'm trying to figure out like if it makes sense to scale out editing or to scale out research. I was on a call earlier today and the person was like, hey, can you keep this up? And I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, like, are you going to be able to do this for like 5-10 years? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. So it's
so far.
Yeah. So far so good.
Yeah. Because I'm so in awe of it. I don't know how you do it, but it's amazing to see. So how do you deal with then switching off? Because I know you've mentioned this on Twitter recently as well, in terms of asking for feedback on switching off and maybe the mental side of things. Do you want to expand on that and talk about if you feel comfortable?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that like, so there's multi-dimensional aspects to mental health and like, interacting with the internet. And for me, I have become increasingly my content. And so like, if the content gets criticized, I've had a hard time separating that criticism from me as a person. So that's been like one aspect of the mental health. And then the second aspect is just like working a lot. And I've always been a workaholic, since, I've had to be to a certain extent. And I've had a tough time, sort of, taking a step back. And when you work for yourself, nobody's telling you to log off. And it also feels like you can't ever log off. So yeah, it's a balancing act that I haven't quite sorted through. Yeah,
and it's weird because if it's your passion, you really enjoy it. But sometimes, even for me, I feel like I get sucked in too far, and then I take a step back, and I'm like, "Oh my dear Lord, what is happening?"
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah. And as you've grown, is it easier or harder to experiment and change things up as you get bigger? So, like in my case, I feel like if I try something new, it bombs. It may get no likes or no responses, and I'll be cut up about it. But at the same time, it's more or less par for the course. But as you get bigger, I mean to ask, like, is there more pressure now that you've made it to continue that success, maybe? Sorry.
No. I like the idea that I've made it. Like, it's still, I don't know. Like, it's like, have I? I don't know. Like, I feel like the audience is pretty receptive to most things that I do. And they're kind of like, okay, like this checks out. It makes sense. But I also feel like I haven't experimented like super heavily with, pivoting into a new entire like medium of, or not medium, but like genre of content. Like I'm very econ, very finance. So I don't know. I just sort of try new things as they come to me. And if it doesn't work, I don't do it anymore. But yeah, I've also kind of stuck to the same core experiments for a while, like the daily TikToks. I've tried out a couple of new things with like more posting on YouTube. For a while, I was posting on YouTube every day, and I stopped that. Yeah. That was a bad experiment because it just wasn't worth it. Nobody wants to hear you talk that much. So yeah, I'm still figuring out. Yeah,
always got to think about return on time. Same thing for me, because YouTube can be a bit of a time sink and a bit of an investment in time. Straight up, I reckon.
Yeah. And it's like I would say it's probably one of the most rewarding platforms just because it's nice to make that longer form content. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a time suck in terms of editing and just uploading. Like it takes about 15 minutes for the YouTube video to actually get uploaded to YouTube. And you have to like select the language, and you have to do the chapters and all these different things that just end up doing the thumbnail. Like none of that's bad, right? Like it's a good way to spend time. But yeah, it's an investment for sure versus TikTok. Yeah.
Especially for you, with you doing everything yourself, I get a bit annoyed sometimes with the amount of tedious stuff for the podcast, having to do all the little, information captions, organise the transcripts. Yeah, how do you do it with all the little things?
Yeah, I mean, like, luckily, I sort of have it down pat now. Like, I know Descript, there's just editing software that I use. I edit within there, download the transcript from there, and kind of like have a process. I upload the video first, and then I do the title, then I do the thumbnail, then I do the description box, then I do the language, then I do the chapters. So it's kind of like a machine at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're able to, are you able to walk us through maybe a day or a week of what content looks like for you? Just that whole process, because same thing, you're prolific and it's high quality too. So I don't know how you do it, but I'd love to hear.
Yeah. So I think for the daily process, a lot of it is just reading a lot. I'm trying to synthesize information. I have a giant Notion page where I compile all my notes. And so everything goes in there. And then, at the end of the day, I'll kind of like review everything, organize everything. And then also I have like the Substack, is running throughout the week. So like I'm kind of writing my newsletter throughout the week too. But yeah, it's a lot of reading and a lot of synthesis and a lot of note taking. I would say I probably spend 40% of my day reading, which is really nice. And then like 20%, in meetings, and 20%, or I guess, what would that math be? 40. Yeah. And then 40%, editing. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. 40, 20. Yeah.
That's a balance I'm sort of struggling with, is how much am I creating, doing interviews like this and doing prep, and then how much am I actually just sort of free roam, like consuming content, which I need to do as part of the thing. So is that a similar problem you have, or?
Yeah, no, totally. If I am not editing at some point during the day, I'm like, I'm not producing enough. I'm not doing a good job. So that's definitely something I really struggle with. But the thing is, like, you can't have content unless you do research. So I have to continuously remind myself that I have to do the things in order to make the content. Yeah.
And if I can ask for your opinion or approach on this, how do you approach monetization and that whole, especially with shorter form content? What's the whole thought process and feelings there?
Yeah, so monetization in Creatorland is definitely the Wild West. Like, nobody really knows how to do it. The creator economy is kind of like in this bear market right now, where a lot of brands pulled deals. So a lot of people who were creators, had to go back into the workforce, or back into a different job. You're still in the workforce if you're a creator. But so like for me, I'm very careful about the brands that I work with. During the bull run, a lot of finance creators were able to get pretty sick deals, but maybe with companies that weren't doing the best job for the people that they were meant to be serving. So I try to be really careful, but I like working with brands that I trust. So Bankless has been an amazing partner. I work with Bloomberg Opinion, have done a deal with Ledger. So it's just like, that sort of stuff helps with monetization. And then I have my Substack, which is like a buy me a coffee sort of model, and that helps with monetization. People are so generous there. And then I have my YouTube channel, which I have a very high CPM because of finance content, which is really nice. So that helps a lot. Yeah.
And if I'm allowed to ask as well, same thing with the brands, do they reach out to you? Did you reach out to them originally? Because same thing, I heard a lot of problems with creators is the first number they get thrown at, they take because they don't know any better. How did you approach dealing with brands? And
yeah, so I'm so lucky that most of them have reached out to me, which has been really nice and good. The bank list, I've had a long partnership with them, and we sort of like knew each other beforehand. We were kind of like friends beforehand, and it worked out well to kind of work together. And then Bloomberg, same sort of deal. Like I know a bunch of people at Bloomberg, and so that worked out super well. So I've never had to do outbound, which is really nice. And yeah, it's a fun way of sort of challenging the content too. Because like making videos for people is different than making videos for yourself. So yeah, it's fun. It's nice. Yeah.
Would you have any advice? Just say this podcast episode blows up. Yeah. Compounding Curiosity starts going viral.
Yes.
What advice would you give me if brands started reaching out? What do you think I should know?
Oh, sure. Read the contract very carefully. There's been quite a few brands who have tried to sneak in exclusivity contracts or exclusivity clauses in contracts with creators. So be very careful with the contract itself. But I think like the biggest thing with brand deals and partnerships, and I'm honestly like still learning about this myself, so I don't know if I have the best advice in the world, but make sure it's somebody that you would use and that you trust, and somebody that you're a fan of and that you think it can be like a longer term partnership, because it's great to have like one-off partnerships, but it's even better to have longer term stuff, especially ones that give you creative freedom. There's a couple of brands who like want things done a certain way, which makes total sense, but that's not what compounding curiosity is all about, right? Like it's about doing things your way and doing it in a way that works, or you're like getting it to work in a certain way. So I'd say like that too, like just maintaining creative freedom and intellectual property rights legally is super important too. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's probably not something you think about right off the bat. You just think about the total dollar amount.
Yeah. There's a lot of nuance to it. And like, what's funny is, most people, in the creator world have like never interfaced legally with these sorts of contracts. Like I had never done it before I started to. So it's definitely like a learning curve. Like I took a contract law 101 thing on Coursera to try and learn a little bit more. Yeah. I mean, like, cause you're just like, they're like 15-page contracts sometimes. And it's a bunch of legal jargon. And like sometimes what I would do previously with like newer brand deals, is I'd redline stuff and be like, I don't understand this. So it's very annoying to the legal counsel, but it helped me a lot to like learn about what they were trying to say and like what the legalese really meant too. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. And same thing, because it's such a solo, lonely life as a creator, you don't have you can't bounce it off anyone.
No, yeah, I mean, like, other people have like management teams, like very big creators have management teams and things like that can look over this stuff. So it's definitely more of like a smaller creator sort of problem, I think. But yeah, you can't really bounce it off anybody other than yourself. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think I heard it the other day. Ryan Holiday, he said the biggest thing for his manager is that someone might try and book him for X amount, and then his manager will turn around and say, no, my other client got booked for 3X that, so they're just lowballing you. Like, he said that's the biggest reason. He's like, get a manager straight away. So I was like,
sure,
makes sense.
Yeah.
But if you can justify it.
Yeah, no, I was, this would be the other advice I'd give you is, I was lowballing myself majorly, when I first started, just because I was excited to like do different brand deals and I was like, oh, this is fun. But yeah, definitely know your worth, and negotiate when you can. And if it makes sense, your time is valuable, your work is valuable. So that's also what I'd say is negotiate.
Yeah. And you also mentioned it just before, but being a financial creator as well, how do the ups and downs of the markets really affect you? Like, does it track the market in a sense?
Sure. I mean, I think, so I've written a couple of newsletter articles about my comment section, essentially, like, do we need a recession? People are the economy, because I was posting these videos, like, oh, okay, inflation is sort of trending down here in the United States. Like, we're not headed towards a recession yet, like all this stuff. And people are like, no, it's the worst economic, like we're in an economic crisis, all this stuff. And I was like, guys, like a couple months ago, you were, YOLOing on GME, AMC, whatever. So there's definitely a big shift in sentiment, and people trend towards the extremes in either direction. So it's been interesting, like managing the doomerism that does happen just in finance at large. Like, I'm sure you've seen it on Twitter, and just making sure that people know, like, okay, like things are not great, but we're working towards making them become better. So that's how the audience sort of fluctuates. And then like myself, I've talked a lot about recessions recently. I've talked a lot about systemic risk, like what's going on with the dollar, what's going on in treasury markets, sort of the consequences of what the Fed is doing. For a long time, I was not in the inflation is transitory camp, but sort of like, okay, the Fed is doing what they can. Like, let's just let them ride. Like, it's going to be okay. But now I'm finding that my content has, and I have with the content, pointed out more of the consequences of the Fed doing what they're doing with a rather blunt toolkit. So, yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned comments just then. So I've seen some weird comments, for lack of a better word, on your work. And I can only imagine some of the other stuff you might get. And you mentioned the death threats on Jim O'Shaughnessy's podcast. So what's your approach? How do you manage? Because I know John from Asian Oratory, he's like, it's great. I have super smart people in the comments, but sometimes you just can't venture into there because it's just such a cesspool. So how do you deal with it? Yeah,
so I take breaks from reading them. So the death threats sort of happened on the Vibeception piece, which ended up going viral. And I was honored to write an opinion article in the New York Times about it, but that brought a lot of people to my content that were not familiar with me or not familiar with how I make content. So they thought I was like joking about stuff, which I do have a jokey tone. But they were like, oh, so they took it very personally, which was unfortunate and scary. But yeah, I definitely take a break from reading the comments because, they can range from being really misogynistic to being really insulting towards my intellect or whatever. So you do have to definitely take a break at times, and that's just like the internet, right? So I wish there was a solution, but people are just gonna be jerks, especially if you have an anonymous profile. There's no consequences to being awful.
Exactly. See, I shouldn't even be thinking about this because it's so far away, but I'm like, oh man, I'd love to hire a manager just to go through the comments, find the interesting ones, and then I'll reply to them and I can ignore the rest.
Yeah, no, that it would be very nice to have that, because there are, like, for every mean comment, there's like 5 wonderful comments that are so supportive and so kind about the work. But unfortunately, the way brains are wired, we love negativity and we focus on that. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
And especially if the way you view yourself, if there's a hint of truth in that. Like, I remember some guy commented on one of my videos, he's like, another white guy expert on Asia. And I'm like, man, like, it kind of hurt because I was like, maybe I think there's a bit of truth in that. I don't know. Yeah. That's where it really hurts me. So
yeah, sensitive spot for sure. And like, that's the same with me. Like, I have a lot of imposter syndrome, about what I do, and people treating me as a source of knowledge on these like really important topics, like, it scares me. So I definitely relate on that aspect. It can be really scary. And then when people point that out, it's like, well, don't say it that loud, geez. So yeah.
Does it get better over time? Because you've been on Bloomberg, you've written for the New York Times. Does imposter syndrome ever go away?
Oh
Please?
Man, I wish. I wish. Mine has gotten worse.
No, don't say that.
No, well, there's this quote. I'm going to butcher it, but basically it's like, the more you know, the less confident you are, something like that. And so because I have learned more, and because I have figured out the content a little bit more, and have had conversations with like amazing people about all this stuff, I'm like, oh, well, what? So because I know more, I actually know, I'm aware that I know less, if that makes sense. Yeah.
So is there anything you wish more people knew about you and your work? So you mentioned all the people that came in, they didn't know what you're doing. What do you wish more people knew about you and what you do, I guess?
So I did an Instagram story thing last night where people can do a Q&A box, essentially. So they ask questions and I respond via my Instagram story. And somebody was like, how did you get so lucky to like, or like what gave you the luck to do what you do? But it was like phrased in actually, let me pull it up really fast because it was phrased in an interesting way where I was like, that doesn't sit super right with me. How did you get lucky to get opportunities no one else would have gotten at your age? And so I think it was like meaning to be very like nice, but the how did you get lucky? That kind of bothered me. So like in terms of how, or what I would want people to know about my work is that I've been sort of doing this for, 6 years. I've had a finance blog since I was in college about options trading. And it's a lot of hard work. And I do believe that luck is the combination of hard work and opportunity. There's a lot of people who have taken chances on me. Even like when I got my job, my first job, the recruiter, it was a blind resume. So like, as I came from I had a great time at my university, but it was a non-target school. Like no big firm wanted me, because it was a non-target and all that stuff. And so like I got into my first job via blind resume. So, like luck is maybe not the word I would choose for some of the stuff that has happened. It's definitely like more of a combination of hard work and opportunity, but I'm very aware that, I'm very grateful that there's so many people that choose to watch the content and that there are so many people that have taken chances on me. So that's like a very long way to answer your question. But, I would say like, yeah. Does it make sense?
No, I love it. Yeah, totally. And because same thing.
Yeah, right.
I've known you since,
Yeah.
You've known a few years now.
You've been around,
The newsletter's gone from math, musings, markets, thoughts on a variety of ideas, data, to Kyla's newsletter.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was math, musings, and markets because I was under compliance at my old job and I wasn't allowed to write about markets. And so I was like, what am I going to write about? Like, I have to keep on writing my blog. This is so important to me. It was like my outlet to the world because I graduated. I think we're the same age, right? Like, you graduated in 2019, right? Did you go to?
I have no idea. I'm born in 96 and I started uni late because I was going to be a Sparky. So I'm a bit all over the joint. I'm 26 now.
Oh, you're 26. Okay. So I just turned 25. So we're basically the same age. But I graduated like right into the pandemic. And so it was like, so it was super important to me to like have that blog during that time. But I was under compliance with Cap Group, which makes sense because I had very, market sensitive information, but I was like, I have to keep on writing. So I would do these like huge data analysis pieces where one was on, do you know Hinge, the dating app?
Yes. I remember reading
So I like downloaded all my data from that, which is like kind of embarrassing retrospectively. And I ran it through R and like did all this coding about it and like was trying to figure out, what the dating app algorithm was doing. I did this huge game theory piece on like Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders and the election. And I did this, one piece that kind of helped me get on the map very early on was I did this, huge cost benefit analysis of riding in a car. So like driving a car versus, just walking or riding your bike everywhere.
Yeah. I even remember, was there one about car sales? Because I made a business card about that, a little snapshot.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, that one was one of them too, because I used to sell cars in college. So that, I did like the economics of car sales, I think it was called.
And even then, like I emphasize a lot with, emphasize, is that the right word? I don't know, because same thing, non-target writing is so important. Like you need a way to get in front of people because those traditional options just aren't available to us.
Yeah, and like you don't have the network. Like my dad's friends couldn't help me get into big finance institutions. Like a lot of people have access to that, like they're, through the networks, which is amazing for them. But yeah, that's like one thing that really helped me in my job application journey coming out of college is I had like this blog that I'd kept for years and was able to show like, okay, this is what I know, this is what I've been doing. So it helps. Yeah. Living portfolio is what I call it.
Well, that's a good way of going. But yeah, it's a tough thing I juggle with. Obviously I'm born on third base. I won't complain, but at the same time, I don't have those finance investing networks. None of my mates do it. Only a couple of mates went to university even. So it's like, I do have to be wary that, it is a bit harder, but you work harder and it makes up for it. Yeah,
absolutely.
So my good mate John from Asianometry has a question. He wanted to ask, how do you adapt long form video content into short form video?
So with that, it's just like, what is the spiciest part of the long form video? So I did this recently. I interviewed Mary Daly from the SF Fed and I clipped that into, like a minute and a half TikTok. And there was a couple of clips to it. So like the first part was, it was a 25-minute interview, and I clipped a minute of it from her answering a question I had asked about generational impact. But then also later on in the interview, she said, the most important takeaway from this interview is to know that the Fed has a growth mindset. And so I basically just like stuck those two clips side by side. And I do it via Descript. So I'm able to edit everything pretty easily that way. But that's kind of how I think about it. It's like, what's the spiciest, biggest takeaway that you want people to have? Yeah.
So you can video edit with Descript now as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
You've always been able to.
Look at me wasting my time.
Oh my gosh, you should use it. It's really, so it's a pain to use. And they're working on it, but, it's amazing. Like, so it's text transcription. So they take your video and turn it into text, and then you can just edit the text. So you don't have to worry about finding the gaps or anything like that, because you can see everything. It's a lot easier to use than like iMovie. So yeah.
Because I same thing for the podcast. I assume I could do the same. I edit through Audacity, and like, I don't know, I'm a bit of a, not asshole, but like perfectionist sometimes. I'm like, oh, you can do so much more powerful things, but at the same time, I'm like, I really should focus on saving some time.
Yeah. I would definitely say, like, if you want like super good stuff, Audacity is probably amazing for that. But Descript, like, it's just so fast and it's so good, and you can crank stuff out.
So further to the last question as well, how do you get young audiences to care about nuanced and complicated stuff, which is what you cover?
Yeah, I mean, I think that people don't give young people enough credit. I think you can probably align with that. I think most people are very interested in it. Like, we have a global world. The only barrier, I think, is people, like, I went into the bike shop the other day to get my bike tuned up, and I was talking to my bike lady, and I was telling her, like, what I do, and she was like, oh, I hate finance. I hate it. I was like, what? Why? And she was like, I just don't understand it. And I was like, so do you not understand it, or do you hate it? And she was like, yeah, well, I just feel like it's like there's not a space for me, like, to talk about finance, to, like, be involved in investing conversations. And so I think, like, for young people, it's just about giving them the tools that they need to understand the world around them. Like, what's going on with the Federal Reserve impacts literally every single person on earth. So it's about just showing people that these things are happening and doing it in a tangible way that isn't jargony and gross and trying to talk over them. Rather, you have to talk to them. And so that's what I try to do. And it's funny because somebody sent me this post from like a mutual fund forum, and this guy was like talking about one of my writing pieces where I had said OMG, I think, and I was saying, but like I was just talking very casually in the writing piece, and he was like, oh, this style of writing is not good and it's not academic and she should be ashamed. And I was like, but that's how you get people to listen. Like, you don't get people to listen by being really jargony and confusing. Like, you have to be accessible. So like this is a really long answer because I'm very passionate about it, but
no, keep going.
Yeah. I think that's the most important thing. Is just doing it that way. And like with the vibe session piece, I don't remember where I saw this, but people loved it, like, which I appreciate, but people always send me, when people are talking about me online. And this one, I was like, oh, a fifth grader could have written this vibe session piece, which I don't know if that's true, but if a fifth grader could understand the vibe session piece, I would be stoked. Like, that's the whole goal. So that's how I think about it. Mm-hmm.
One thing I've come to realize is the internet is big enough that there is space for people like that, and there is space for someone else to write it in a more technical, dense, academic way that person might want. Like, I don't get why people try and shove people in boxes that's not them.
Yeah, I don't know either. I think that's a big problem right now, societally speaking.
Yeah, that's true. So is there anything we haven't talked about that's consequential about the future of your life as a creator?
That's a big question. I have a company too named Bread, so a financial education company, and that's sort of being built out alongside the content. So it's interesting balancing, like, trying to build a company and then doing the content full time, and that sort of stuff. But yeah, I mean, I would say, like, it's a gift, and I'm super grateful to be doing all that I've done and to have all the opportunities that I've had. It's been really amazing. So yeah.
Do you want to expand on Bread for 5 minutes or so before? Yeah. And just explain what's going on there and what you're working towards.
Yeah. So the whole idea is to, like, make a Duolingo for finance, and to create a playground for people to interact with finance content in a way that is accessible, engaging, etc. So the whole goal with Bread is to be like that front user-facing platform where people can like learn about the stock market, they can learn about the bond market, they can have all these tools to engage with these terms that maybe are a little bit foreign at times. But then also on the back end, one of the goals is to work with different financial advisory firms who maybe don't reach younger audiences in the way that they'd always like to, and help them sort of tap into like what this next generation is thinking about and why. And then also the other goal is to work with other people in the financial education space and kind of have like an open source financial education model, like where everyone's trying different things, sort of like an incubator for financial education companies on the other side too. So yeah, it's a lot.
What does the work look like trying to juggle that? And is it building a backlog of content for that, or how?
Yeah, right now it's the backlog. So I have this huge Notion page where I'm sort of building out all these concepts, terms, definitions, all my drawings, all things like that. If the newsletter has a lot of drawings in there, I like to draw visuals for things. So it's right now it's just a bunch of content building, and then ideally soon it'll get more built into an actual platform. Yeah.
Do you just do your drawings through an iPad?
Yeah, I use something called GoodNotes. Yeah, it's really nice. I like it a lot. I'm a very much a visual learner. I think most people are. So it helps a lot with sort of figuring out things to draw it out. Yeah.
And I like the style as well because it just seems more relatable.
Little stick figures. Yeah.
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 Just keep it simple. There's no need to be fancy getting all the Canva graphics. Like, just draw it out.
Yeah. No, I'm a Canva power user too, though. I love Canva. But yeah, no, keep it simple. Yeah.
I do everything on Canva. It's actually kind of scary. I was going to ask this earlier, but for backlog, is it even possible for you to build a backlog for your TikTok content? Because a lot of it is much like daily market updates. Can you build that out? Or
yeah, see, that's actually an issue that I've run into is like the concepts are rapidly changing, right? Even just like pointing to the 60-40 portfolio, that doesn't quite work the way that it used to. So it's still possible. And a lot of it is just like me pulling from my work previously or like my, classes in school, because I did study finance, and trying to like explain things in a more direct way. But yeah, unfortunately, a lot of the content is more current events, which are a little bit harder to build for evergreen style content. Yeah.
Because when you first started TikTok, it was more like sciencey based videos. I remember the video on bees. And do you think TikTok prefers more current, up-to-date content or evergreen stories? Is there a difference you notice there?
I think it depends. Like one of my best performing videos was just in Economics 101. So I went through the history of economics and just explained, okay, like we did have a barter system despite what different books might say. We did have a barter system, and then going up and explaining like, okay, so Adam Smith came in and then we had Milton Friedman, Keynes. And that was a really well done or well performing video. And then I did one on the yield curve that did really well. Just like, what is it? But I would say like right now, because things are so wacky in finance, most people are sort of looking for current events. So ideally, if things were calmer, before things kind of got super crazy, I was doing a lot more evergreen content on TikTok. But now because things are so wacky, people just demand, I think, a little bit more current event stuff. So yeah,
there's plenty to work with.
Yeah, gosh, it's never ending, and that's also really nice. Because I remember when I first started March 2021, it was kind of like, okay, GameStop's happening, crypto's happening, but like, the stock market went up every day, and the Fed wasn't doing anything. Now the Fed is doing so much, and the stock market is not going up every day. So there's a lot to talk about, which is nice from a content perspective. Not necessarily nice from a living in the world perspective, but yeah. Yeah.
So I'm very conscious of your time, so I'll get into my closing round of questions.
Sure.
I usually ask, is there any books or people, but given you tweeted the other day about how you've been very grateful for people taking chances on you, have there been any people that have been influential in shaping you and your work?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I know it's on the spot, so like, no worries if you miss anyone out.
No. It's funny that you say that, because I sent a bunch of thank yous out. I sent a bunch of thank yous out this weekend to people, just thanking them for like investing in me and being an inspiration for my work. So actually, a really well timed question. Ben Eifert is amazing. Chris, who writes
I know Chris. Yeah.
Moon Tower Meta. Claudia Sam.
And same thing. He reached out to me early on as well. So I'm Sorry to
Oh
interrupt.
no.
but
Yeah. Well, so that's the thing about him is he's just so supportive and is always willing to like bounce ideas. We actually were able to meet in person because he is in the town that I live in for visiting his friends. And so we were able to meet in person and we just talked for like 3 hours about my work. And I was like, gosh, I feel so selfish. And he's like, it's not a big deal. Like I want to talk about this stuff. And I think just having that, not like necessarily a mentor, but having somebody to just bounce ideas off of, and he writes so beautifully, and you know he reaches out to people like us. I think he's amazing. Yeah.
And sometimes it's good just you might be so confused and unsure of your work, and then someone older, more experienced just says, "Hey, no, you're on the right track. Keep going." That was literally what he said to me, basically.
Aww. Yeah, I know. That's the other thing. Like, there's a lot of because it's confusing, right? Your early 20s are just a mess, and you're like, I don't even know if I'm a person. Like, what's going on? Where's my frontal cortex? Like, and so people like that who are just like, hey, like, don't worry, it's gonna be okay. You know, the line is not always going straight up all the time. I think they're really valuable. Yeah.
And it's nice, yet also does worry me every now and again how much a small comment can affect me. It's like, I love it when it's a positive one, but yeah,
me too.
I'm just grateful.
Oh, me too. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think people realize, and that's something I try to be conscious about too, is like, it's really simple to make people's days a little bit better by saying something nice to them. So I feel that, and I'm sure, so I try to do that. A lot is to be positive. Sometimes I struggle with it, but try to be positive. Yeah.
No, I love that outlook. In terms of generally, what do you think, and we're still young, so it's a bit harder, but what do you think is the most undervalued life experience that university age students don't give weight to? So what do you think is an underrated skill or an experience that maybe they should have?
Well, I think that we both align with this is writing. I think that, and I hate seeing like the AI discourse where they're like, oh, nobody's going to have to write essays ever again. It's like, that's not true. Maybe it's like true to a certain extent, and like it'll help enhance essays, but people are still gonna have to write to a certain extent. But I think like writing and conveying your ideas is super powerful because it allows you to synthesize better. It allows you to get your own thoughts out into the world, because that's something, and I'm curious if you are similar. I've really struggled with like, what are my thoughts? Like, what do I actually have opinions on? So I think like that sort of stuff is super valuable for university students to explore, is like, okay, I have an opinion. Why do I have this opinion? What facts do I have to back up that opinion? Just like doing critical research on yourself. Yeah.
And the biggest thing I found, especially when doing the podcast, I still do. I consume podcasts religiously. Like everything Invest Like the Best, like anything I can get my hands on. And then I'm like, yep, I align with these views. I listen to it all the time. And then as soon as I try and talk and explain it, it's donuts. There's nothing there. Yeah. So being able to write and explain it is crucial. So important.
Yeah. I've recently started to, so I have like an alt TikTok account where I post more of like my life and like philosophy things, because I love philosophy. And it's really been interesting to turn the camera on myself and to be like, okay, on the spot, like, what's the difference between loneliness and being alone? So like trying to come up with those bigger theories, or to figure out what I think about those things. Yeah. Because you're right. Like if you're put on the spot with that kind of stuff, it's like, well, what do I think? Like, what have I ever had a thought in my life? So yeah.
Are we allowed to plug it?
Right. Oh yeah. I didn't know you. Wait, how do you know about it?
It's part of the research. I'd be a bad interview if I didn't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, for sure. Yeah, that's funny. It's goofy, so it's not always just
sorry
philosophy.
To put you on the spot.
No, it's totally. I brought it up. It's my own fault. But I do think like that kind of stuff is valuable too.
It's a good insight.
Yeah. But I think like also having accounts that are not just how people always perceive you to be, if that makes sense, is also important. Like I get a lot of value from creating, like I used to make these short videos on the account about like things that I was working through, like my mental health stuff, everyone's mental health stuff. So that kind of like creative outlet is helpful. Yeah,
exactly. It's an outlet. It's a release. So no, good on you. And lastly, the plan from here: keep building bread. How do you think about going forward? Do you set big goals, or are you just taking it as it comes?
Right now, I'm just taking it as it comes. It's been amazing. Like being able to interview somebody from the Fed was like undescribably indescribably amazing. I can't even put words to it. So for me, like I want to build bread, want to keep on innovating on content and really figure out how to bring more people into this, economic entity, people are the economy sort of conversation, and keep on creating these explainers about the world that's going on. Have a couple of projects that will be announced eventually that I've also been working on. But yeah, build bread, build the content, just keep on rolling. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And anything else do you want to add today? And obviously where to find you. Kyla Scanlon is probably the best starting point because it contains everything. But anything else you want to add or plug?
No, yeah. So I have my newsletter, the YouTube channel, the podcast is called Let's Appreciate. And then I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, I'm on YouTube, like I said, and Twitter. So that's all the content. And then, at Kyla Scan, basically everywhere. And also what's lucky about us is our names are pretty unique. So if you Google us, I think I'm the only Kyla Scan that comes up, or Kyla Scanlon that comes up. So yeah.
Yeah, perfect. I totally agree. It's sometimes you can't avoid it.
Yeah, for better or worse. There's some pictures that are from college in the Google images, and I'm like, I would love for these not to show up. But they're not bad. They're not bad. It's just like, oh God, yikes.
I have the same experience. Remember, what was Google's social network called? Google Plus or whatever it was?
Oh, yeah.
There was one on there, and I was like, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. And I petitioned to get it removed. And then finally, because they went under, it disappeared. I was like,
thank God. Yeah. Mine is like attached to some stuff I was doing in college. And I'm just like, it'd be awesome if this wasn't the very first picture that came up. But what can you do?
And the more you click on it, the more it recommends
I know.
it to others.
Oh God. Oh, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Why do we talk about that? I'll cut this out.
No, it's okay. It's very it's like a very much I don't know, like a silly thing to worry about, but definitely just a worry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kyla, thank you so much for coming on. It's been great, and I've learned so much more. Than what I thought. I thought I would learn it, but thank you so much, really, overall.
Yeah. No. Always happy to. Thank you for having me.
If you enjoyed this podcast episode, be sure to check out the website compoundingpodcast.com. On the website, you'll find every episode complete with transcripts, show notes, and other related resources. If you want an email notification every time an episode releases, plus my lessons and takeaways from each episode, be sure to sign up to the Substack. So that's compoundingcuriosity.substack.com. Either way, links to all content mentioned today will be in the description below, and you can also connect with me on Twitter @ScarrettKalani. But until next time, have a good one.